Good evening and welcome to the June 22nd, 2020 work session of the Mayor and City Council. Tonight we have one discussion item and it is community support and CDBG funding recommendations. And I'm going to turn it over to Britta Monaco.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's our pleasure to join you in this virtual world to talk about what we've been doing to assist the residents and businesses of Gaithersburg during the pandemic, and then how we plan to continue those efforts in the months to come. Joining us tonight are Assistant City Manager Tom Lonergan, Community Services Division Manager Maureen Herndon, and Housing and Community Development Division Chief Louise Kaufman. Maureen and I are going to be reviewing our community support efforts, and then Tom and Louise are going to explore the opportunities with the additional community development block grant funding that we will be receiving through the Federal CARES Act. Despite the horrors of the virus and the economic devastation it has wrought, this crisis has sort of shined a light on the amazing resiliency, creativity, and compassion of our community. Even before the governor issued his stay-at-home order back in March, we quickly created a comprehensive emergency assistance and community support page on our website. It offers resources and links to everything from rental assistance programs and IRS tax filing changes to food delivery, childcare, loan programs for businesses, testing sites, and we even post transit schedule changes. The page includes volunteer and donation opportunities as well. We update it daily as new information becomes available, and it's one of the most visited pages on our website currently. What we've been able to accomplish thus far is the result of years of effective collaboration with our local nonprofit providers, our faith-based organizations, local businesses, and the residents of Gaithersburg. We've tapped heavily into the relationships we forged to quickly coordinate efforts to address the most urgent needs. Maureen is going to walk you through some of the efforts in just a moment. She and the entire community services team, that includes Tawana Lofton, Carla Contreras, and Lauren Sukol, have done amazing work identifying the areas of most need, working with other jurisdictions and agencies to ensure that our services have maximum impact, and then adjusting, frankly, how they do what they do to address the needs as quickly as possible. It has been, and it will continue to be, a monumental task. But it's not just the 4 people in community services doing all the heavy lifting. Homeless services and Parks and Rec staff are coordinating meal distributions for older adults and unsheltered homeless people. A few Parks and Rec staff have even been temporarily tasked to community services to help with the sheer volume of service requests and logistical needs. Our police are helping with the orderly distribution of food at large events. Housing and neighborhood services staff are working with our landlords, helping to disseminate information to our tenants and assisting with the rent relief cases. And economic development staff have been connecting us to businesses so we can seek donations. Legal and finance to help with contracts and purchasing. PIO has done some graphic design and outreach. IT staff, as you well know, support multiple committee meetings as we quickly deliberated FY21 grant funding. The GIS team created that wonderful COVID-19 mapping dashboard. And even our public works crews will soon be helping. They're going to be distributing door hangers about our new financial Navigator program to some targeted communities when they pick up recycling. There are employees in just about every other department and division whose dedicated efforts continue to support our community. But we also want to thank you for your unwavering support. The additional appropriation you authorized in the budget for social service grants will be well spent on food and nutrition programs, housing, vocational, financial counseling and senior services, health and mental health programs, and educational support programs for our young people. We appreciate that you continue to share information on social media. We thank you for advocating for federal, state, and county relief initiatives. And we are grateful, frankly, for the faith you place in city staff as we scramble to respond to this unforeseen crisis. So together, I think we make a pretty awesome team. So I'd like to now turn it over to Maureen Herndon, who's going to give you an idea of what the needs in our community look like today, and then what we're doing in partnership with others to address those needs now and in the future. Maureen?
Thank you, Britta. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to thank you for giving the Community Services Division the opportunity to update you during this difficult time. As Britta said, I will address the COVID-19 related challenges our residents are facing and the partnerships and programs developed in an attempt to meet these needs, thanks to your support. These needs we've been working on over the last 3 months and most likely will continue well into the next fiscal year. In addition, I do want to point out that our grant demographic statistics program, we began tracking demographic statistics last year through our grant program and continue through this time as well. That, and in addition to the input being received from our area nonprofit partners and residents, we clearly see the support for ongoing need for a deeper look, analysis, and action plan to address equitable service delivery and opportunities in our wonderfully diverse city. The inequities in opportunity and wellness, particularly within the economic and health and wellness areas for our Brown and Black city communities, has become extremely evident during this serious economic and health crisis like the one we're all experiencing. The impact of this crisis is most definitely impacting our city minority populations at much higher rates and in much more severe ways. I just wanted to ensure, Mayor and Council, that together with our city residents and the Community Advisory Committee and Education Enrichment Committee and city staff and partners, we hope to continue and enhance deeper dialogues and self-education around this most critical topic. And we look forward to additional conversations and next steps as we go forward together. Now I will jump into our first slide, which is the impact of the public health crisis as we've seen it over these last few months and through research with other city staff. In a nutshell, some of the main areas: unemployment, public assistance, housing and rent, and positive COVID testing. Under unemployment, through our city planning department, we're looking at about 22.47 estimated unemployment rate, which includes about 6,400 residents unemployed due to the emergency. This does not account for those not applying for unemployment benefits. We're also getting reports from our county community action agency. They're doing ongoing needs analysis, and they have a wonderful report out, COVID Impact and Recovery. They reported at the time of the publication of this PowerPoint, which was towards the end of May, that calls at the 311 center, which is the county's information line, have gone up from an average of 150 a week to well over 600. Applications for public assistance, which includes things like food stamps and Medicaid, have increased sixfold. We have a little update on the housing and rent category. Initially, 200,000 of the county's COVID rent relief monies were being processed, and 100,000 was already paid out. As of today, we got an update that 350 households in the county are now on a wait list. The county's doing a remarkable job to get the cases processed, and they've already committed about $400,000. The food area, as you can well expect, has had a huge impact. Manus has seen a 77% increase in households, 6 times more increase in new clients. 20877 continues to be the second most served zip code area in the county. Gaithersburg Health continues to see higher numbers. And as far as the COVID tests, at this time that we did the PowerPoint, there were 1,495 cases in our zip codes. As of today, it's just over 1,700 as the total number. So that just gives a snapshot of some of the public health crisis. In the next slide, we did a little bit more on the food-related impact. And I just wanted to point out that the groups involved in the food initiative are working very closely together, and actually we're coordinating a meeting of all the Gaithersburg food providers for June 30th, as we all continue to look at statistics and trends and possible update or revisions to the programs that are operating now. Okay, I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of the types of calls that are coming in. That'll be the next slide. to community service directly. These numbers pertain to April and May. In general, we're seeing about 5 to 10 direct calls a day, 10 to 20 calls or emails from area nonprofits and county agencies. We're getting direct calls, but as you can see from here, we're getting even more calls from our partners who are also working with our city residents. As of today, this number cited here is 68 COVID-related rental assistance cases that are being processed through the City Housing Fund that Community Service does in conjunction with Louise and the Housing Department. That number is now at 77. Just to give you an idea, the total for the past 12 months that we access this fund was 38, and we're already at 77 since the emergency started. So we're definitely seeing a large impact in the housing field. We have with the 62 cases around food and service. We get multiple calls around all sorts of things, whether it be food or health kits or unemployment or COVID testing, or every day there's something new. We're also hearing from city businesses. That number, we're close to 85 now for that particular number as far as giving information out on various services. Just as an extra note, I got a statistic. The Family Service Agency is our contact for the diaper bank that's run out of DC. Just to give you an idea, in the last 3 weeks in May, they gave out 33,000 diapers and served 357 babies. So there's a lot of different new statistics that are coming up through this crisis, but we're really excited that that program is helping our city residents. You might wonder how residents are hearing about community services. Britta mentioned a few things. We did get out about 10,000 resource information flyers to all our apartment complexes and city stores. We're updating the resource list with Britta that she mentioned on our website. We learned today that it's had 5,100 hits, with 4,100 of them being unique. So we're excited about that the word's getting out. And we're continuing our community service newsletter to about 100 area nonprofits, congregations, and businesses. And we're also working very closely with economic development and neighborhood services, doing ongoing emails to our landlords and businesses. If you have any additional ideas on how we can get resources out, any ideas are very welcome. Okay, the next slide. This goes into a little bit more of some of the collaborations happening. As Britta mentioned, we're very thankful for the city's relationships across the board with the county and the state and all the organizations that you represent and are part of. It really made for a nice, smooth transition and automatic working partners to deal with some of these special challenges. In particular, Tawana in our office is running a weekly housing counseling group. This is all our area housing counselors that we fund through the city grant program that we work with on an ongoing basis, as well as our friends from City of Rockville. We also have Montgomery County on that group, which has been extremely helpful, so we can stay on top of as much as possible what's happening in the county as far as resources available for city residents and to avoid duplication of services as much as possible, and a lot of brainstorming on how to deal with some unique situations. We also participate in the weekly Montgomery County Food Task Force group, and familiar partners on that group are Manna Food, Gaithersburg Health, Women Who Care Ministries, MCPS, and about 100 additional food partners countywide. It's a pretty incredible coordination by nonprofit Montgomery and the county's food council. Very, very helpful weekly meeting. Jimmy is involved on the ongoing Montgomery County street outreach team. You know, that street outreach work has not stopped. They've been out there working with homeless folks from the beginning of the crisis. Up County Planning Group for Feeding the Unsheltered led into the program that you're probably aware of that I'll talk about in the next slide, that took place at City Hall parking lot for those that are unsheltered. And Jimmy's also been actively involved in the homeless crisis response team. The next slide talks a little bit more about specifics on city-based food response in April and May. The Activity Center has hosted with our staff from the Senior Center. They have coordinated a pickup and delivery program for city seniors. This has been held at the Activity Center every Wednesday. Currently, 1,736 meals have been distributed to 65 city seniors. They're also recently added produce. So Smitty and his team work closely with the Senior Nutrition Program and Montgomery County Department of Rec and have done that program every week since the beginning of April. We also help coordinate lunch meals to seniors at Hillside and the Oaks Apartment. This has been a brand new collaboration that we learned about. MCPS has been incredible with this, and the lunches are provided through the World Central Kitchen, and actually Simply Fresh Caterer is one of the groups that work with World Central Kitchen. So they're served over 2,300 meals to date at each of these communities. So we're very thankful that that's happening for our seniors. And then the other direct program that's happened, coordinated by city staff, is through our city homeless services, Montgomery County Health and Human Services, our Subway in Old Town, Simply Fresh Caterers, Montgomery County Muslim Foundation, and many donors that assisted in setting up a daily breakfast program Monday through Sunday on the grounds of City Hall. So that will continue until the end of this month. In addition, the last thing I wanted to mention was there's been a daily bag lunch at Epworth Church by the Lord's Table Soup Kitchen, and they have served over 1,300 brown bag lunches. So that's been very successful too, and also in the city. Our last slide in regards to food, that would be the next one, is, as many of you are aware of, the MCPS ongoing sites set up for grab-and-go sites for our city families continue. The amount of meals MCPS has provided is well into the millions at this point. They have hosted sites at Brown Station, Gaithersburg Middle, Montgomery Village Middle, Shady Grove Middle, Gaithersburg High School. So that's been a lifeline for our city families. Manna Food Center also has provided produce at these sites. And in addition, we have learned, a community service staff along with our city police, who have been absolutely wonderful, in the do's and don'ts of massive food distributions. So we've really had to take a crash course in that, and we kind of all learned along the way. And thousands of pounds of produce have been distributed by Catholic Charities and Crossway Community at several locations in the city, consistently at Gaithersburg Middle School every Saturday, but they've also been held at Gaithersburg High School, the Activity Center, and Lake Forest Mall. Just this past Saturday at Gaithersburg Middle School, Crossways Community gave out 1,000 produce boxes and 4,000 cartons of milk. So it is definitely a challenge if you ask our police with the with the traffic situation, but they've done an incredible job meeting with our partners beforehand and setting up things as safe as possible. So going off food, which obviously has been a huge need, the next slide, I just wanted to point out, and many of you may have already seen this, but our GIS department has developed a most incredible dashboard. This dashboard actually, folks from the county have been going to and asking about and complimenting our GIS staff on it. We've used this tool for our food coordinating groups to stay on top of stats. We've used it to stay on top of COVID cases when we met with our health and mental health folks. So I just wanted to point this out to everyone and to the public. It is on our City of Gaithersburg site. If you go to where our services are listed for the COVID emergency, you'll see a link to this dashboard. It also includes all the meal sites and restaurants and store information and delivery, food delivery options for people in the city. So it's a wealth of information. Our next slide talks about our Gaithersburg Cares Hub, and thank you to Britta and the mayor for being on TV and doing such a wonderful job this morning in regards to these city programs and to the hub. A special thanks I have to say to Seneca Creek Community Church, where the hub is located, and to Manna Food. This program started over 5 weeks ago. A similar program is happening in Germantown at Black Rock. Suki McFadden from Seneca Creek Church and I went out and took a look at it. The folks there said, you know, they wanted to make us aware of the increasing high 20877 COVID numbers, and asked if we would consider opening a hub. The church and all our donors, which are listed on the website of the Cares Hub, got this up and going in a matter of 5 days. So right now we're serving 50 to 55 families a week that reside in the greater Gaithersburg area that are recovering from COVID-19. In total, we've served 110 households. Donations have been wonderful and significant and consistent. The families receive at least 3 bags of food. They're receiving produce. They're receiving resource information, health kits, items for the kids, and we're going to be adding some indoor sports equipment through Leveling the Playing Field, which is one of our partners as well. So we thank everyone for being involved with that and encourage anyone to call us if they know of someone in our area that's ill that could benefit from this program. Okay, I'm going to switch a little bit to our Safety Net Grant Program for FY21 and talk a little bit about the work of the Community Advisory Committee and the Education Committee, so I can go to the next slide. Again, we want to thank Mayor and Council for their ongoing support of our Community Service Grant Program and our nonprofit school program, and historically our school grants program. So once this COVID challenge hit, the committees began talking and meeting about and looking forward to what is the best use of city funds for FY21. The Community Advisory Committee and the Education Enrichment Committee actually met together. They met virtually together 3 times to take a look at the emerging needs, the ongoing challenges, discuss some research, discuss currently what staff was seeing. We then took a short questionnaire that we sent to our current nonprofit youth agency providers and our current community service grantees, asking them for what they're saying as far as challenges with the people they serve, and also how they intend to respond to the new challenges. They came back with some incredible responses. We were very pleased to see that our current FY20 grantees did not miss a beat. There were classes going on virtually. There were services being provided in all sorts of creative ways. There were new collaborations starting from like day one. So we got some really solid statistics and input from our present providers. So we were happy to look at the opportunity to potentially, not renew contracts, but keep with our partners for at least the next 6 months to deliver these services. The committees did need to make decisions about how the additional monies that Mayor and Council awarded would be allotted. So after all the needs assessment and the feedback from the nonprofits, they came up with particular percentages for the different scope areas. And the areas of housing and food were determined to be the top priorities. This slide that you're seeing here now is the percentage of allocations from the entire pot of money, which is 1,072,057. So that is the amounts that our grantees are basically getting for FY20 plus the additional added to primarily the housing and food areas. If you go to the next slide, you can see it might be a little bit clearer. We had 144,257 extra dollars for FY21. This was the money that the percentages, priority percentages were applied to. So this graph will show you after all is said and done for FY21, what percentage of the additional monies, what areas they're going in. So food and nutrition is getting 36% of the additional monies, housing, financial, vocational, 44%, et cetera. So it gives you a feel for that. Okay, and then the only other thing I wanted to say also about the grant monies, there were some additional monies also put in the areas of vocational services and health services. The vocational services need due to the COVID really was very much stressed in the response that they gave us, but also as obviously with the unemployment rate, we really wanted to look at supporting this scope of service as much as possible. And one of the needs that has come up, which we would have never thought of, I don't think, was the fact that so much online job applications are necessary, and some of our families and individuals out of work do not have access to that. So our vocational partners have been doing a tremendous amount of work, spending a tremendous amount of time helping people either access equipment or actually helping them virtually apply for unemployment and apply for jobs. So we wanted to put some more support there. And under the health service, similar scenario going on, a lot of telehealth programs happening through our clinics. But some of our most of our residents did not have capabilities like at-home blood pressure machines or ways to really keep track of their health while at home. So some of those special considerations were mentioned through our partners' responses to our questionnaire. The other area besides the food and the health and the vocational that we did put in a little bit more, it was to support our family domestic violence shelter, the BAK shelter through family services, as it's basically turned into a 24/7 operation with the kids being out of school. A lot more challenges happening there with the shelter. Okay, so that's a quick summary of the community service grants and the nonprofit youth grants and the breakdown going forward in FY21. The next slide, Britta mentioned as well, will address a brand new program. I do want to say that this program is launching on July 17th. So the number you see up there is not active as of today, but will be soon. Thanks to the efforts of our community services staff that did the grant writing, and Tawana Lofton, as you know, who heads up our Financial Wellness Coalition. The city received an $80,000 grant from the cities for financial empowerment. This grant will fund a financial navigator program that specifically around COVID-related issues. So we are actually contracting with one of our nonprofits who will be providing pertinent information and navigation through a whole range of opportunities from the state to the county to the city, as far as rental assistance, unemployment, vocational opportunities, how to sign up for food benefits, how to negotiate with creditors, what the laws are around landlords or evictions. So this is going to be a one-on-one phone hotline, so to speak, that will again launch on July 17th. There'll be a lot more information out about that. and we're hoping and contracting to reach 1,200 area residents in the next 12 months. Some of the things that you'll see coming out in the form of advertising will include potentially signs at our city bus stops, apartment door hangers, and of course a lot on social media. Okay, my final slide before I hand this over to Louise is a huge thank you to our partners. I hesitated in doing this part because I really didn't want to leave anyone out. So I apologize if I did, and we'll really continue to try to make sure we give incredible thanks to so many people that are working with the City of Gaithersburg to serve our families in need. And this was a list of some of the main ones, including Montgomery County Health and Human Services, the Volunteer Center, Montgomery County Public Schools, the Food Council, nonprofit Montgomery, Seneca Creek Community Church, the Montgomery County Community Emergency Response Team, who actually delivers for us every week out of the hub, all the Gaithersburg Cares Hub partners, multiple city departments and staff that Britta had already mentioned, and all of our 80 nonprofit members of the Gaithersburg Coalition of Providers. So thank you so much for listening, and I will be here for any questions after Louise's presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. In the next slides, I will be describing the funds that are available to the city and county through the CARES Act, along with local county funds that are being made available to respond to the housing crisis in this county and in the city, brought on by sort of like massive unemployment that's taken place since March. I will also be talking about how the CDBG program has been modified to help us more responsibly and effectively respond to COVID for our low-income residents. I will describe the specific activities that the city staff have identified for you to review this evening and hopefully to approve. And then finally, I will review sort of the next steps in the process. After that, Tom will talk briefly and then we'll take your questions. So in this slide, as I said, the CARES Act did appropriate about $5 billion in CDBG funds throughout the country. The city of Gaithersburg is receiving $265,900. Montgomery County got an award of $2.9 million. The state of Maryland is going to be receiving $16 million. And for the first time, they can appropriate some of those funds to current entitlement communities, which in the past they have not been able to do. And then emergency shelter grant funds also came from the CARES Act directly to Montgomery County. The city does not get an allocation of emergency shelter grant funds, but Montgomery County does use those funds to support Gaithersburg homeless residents. Montgomery County, in addition, as I'm sure you've all seen, because Montgomery County Council have been very busy, Montgomery County has also appropriated of their own funds emergency assistance rental program monies, and they call it ERP, round 1 and 2, that's $10 million, a $3.5 million COVID rent relief program, and then the public health emergency grant, which is actually a small business grant, also through the county. I just included this because one of the things we're bringing before you tonight is a similar small business grant proposal. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, under the CARES Act, they have appropriated significant CDBG funds, and they've also changed a lot of the regulations to simplify the process for grantees so that we can get the money out quickly. Typically, There are very few restrictions on how we use our CDBG funds. That's why this program is so popular among cities and counties. You must meet the national objectives, one of which we prioritize, which is serving low and moderate income residents. It's available to the cities and the counties and states based on a number of criteria: population, age of housing, poverty, extent of overcrowding. So the census, when people complete the census, that really helps with distributing those funds. So the CARES Act does allow for some important changes, which I will sort of briefly describe, and I can expand on this later. But the most important change is that the public service cap, which has been in place for many years under the statute, has been lifted. That means that in the past, we've only been able to use 15% of our annual award to do public service activities, and we've deliberately chosen housing assistance as our activity. So in the past, we've only been able to assist about 38 households in a year. That is going to be, we're going to be able to increase that number significantly now as a result of this cap being lifted. So the city, under Tom's direction, came together with some volunteers from Parks and Rec, Carolyn Ryan, from Public Works, Deb, from Planning and Code, Chris Berger, Community Services, both Tawana and Maureen participated. Tom and I and Sharon participated. So we came together to talk about sort of what these departments are seeing as the greatest need, and is there money available to support that need, so that the CARES Act CDBG funds can be used differently. So as a result of that ad hoc committee, we've sort of come together with our recommendations for tonight. So next slide, please. So as the CARES Act specifically states, and HUD has reinforced this numerous times, that the CDBG COVID money must be used to prevent, prepare for, or respond to COVID-19. Can't be used for any other reason. And as you know, we've always used a significant portion of our CDBG funds for down payment and closing cost assistance. That's been a great program and really well used, particularly among our low and moderate income households. But we're not prioritizing, we're not recommending CDBG COVID money go to that program, because what I'm finding in the applications coming to the city is that many of those residents who in the past were able to secure a first mortgage because of reduced incomes just aren't able to do that. So they're obviously not going to be able to get our funds to support their home buying. So instead, what we're recommending is, and this is out of our $265,900 specific CDBG COVID allocation, $100,000 in grants, an average about $5,000 to micro businesses in the city. And a micro business, according to HUD, is defined as 5 or fewer employees, including the owner, and that the owner must meet the income restrictions. The second recommendation is another $100,000 to assist with housing-related costs, including rent, mortgage, common ownership community fees, or utility assistance, wherever the need is greatest to keep people housed. And that doesn't just mean keeping people from being evicted, but also keeping people from being foreclosed upon. And then we have 2 other requests. One is that you allow us to assign $35,000 to a qualified nonprofit agency to manage the housing assistance requests. This has been a huge workload on staff. Tawana, Maureen, Carla, myself. There are lots of documents that need to be reviewed. It's very time consuming. And we believe that we can help more people if we have a third party to do sort of the frontline administration, accepting the applications, reviewing the applications, doing sort of the first cut review approval. And then lastly, about $31,000 to contract with an experienced career counselor to help with job training and really retraining, because we know that lots of jobs are going to disappear, particularly in the retail business. The city of Gaithersburg, according to Sharon, because I asked Sharon to look into this for me, she says about 15% of the jobs in the city are retail. And so we anticipate that a lot of those jobs will go away. So we're hoping to use some of our funds to get our residents retrained or more appropriately trained. Next, please. So if you do approve our recommendations tonight, then I obviously have work to do. I have to prepare a substantial amendment to my current year CDBG plan. Once that's been completed, it will go out to the public for a minimum 5-day comment period. That's another change that took place under the CARES Act. It used to be a minimum of 30 days. We used to we were required to have at least 2 public hearings and 2 meetings, not public hearings, but meetings with the community. So that's been modified significantly. Any comments that are received will go into the plan that I finalize and submit to HUD. Once HUD approves it, then I'll set up those funds into the software program so I can draw down funds once we've spent it. And then we'll have a grant agreement with HUD that needs to be executed. And in the past, HUD has said, you need to try and get your funds spent in 12 to 18 months. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but that's sort of the goal always. So next, please. So that's it. Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I would just briefly say, because so much of the housing and community service needs were covered perfectly by Maureen and Louise, I just wanted to very briefly talk a little bit about the thought behind the allocation for the micro grants. As you know, since the onset of COVID-19 and the associated shutdowns of the economy, a myriad of local or loan and grant programs have been rolled out at the federal, state, and county level to support businesses impacted by the pandemic. Recognizing the scale of the problems that the economy was facing and the size of the programs that were initially being made available to businesses by other sources, economic development staff was not initially supportive of establishing a city-sponsored support program until the scope of the pandemic's impacts on local businesses was better understood and other sources of funds had been accessed by local businesses. As our ad hoc committee supported setting aside a portion of these additional CDBG funds to support Gaithersburg's small business community, we did look at the county's microgrant program and considered it probably to be the model by which we should craft our own. No sense reinventing the wheel and wasting time on trying to reimagine what seemed to be working well. As Louise mentioned, the county's micro enterprise stabilization program does provide financial assistance to income eligible for-profit businesses as required by CDBG or HUD, with 5 or fewer employees that have experienced a reduction in revenue as a result of the public health emergency. Businesses of this size and income level are more likely to be located in older, private, independently owned commercial properties located largely, not entirely, but largely east of I-270 with landlords who have been unwilling or simply unable to make rent concessions these past few months, as has been afforded to many tenants in larger REIT-owned centers. These are often underserved businesses who did not receive PPP or EIDL because they are micro enterprises lacking the banking relationships needed to access federal funding. This probably isn't the time or place to get into all of the details of the eligibility requirement, but they would largely mirror the county's program. The business would have to be located within the city limits, employing 5 or fewer. Past due rent, utility payments, inventory, other operating expenses could be considered. You can't be delinquent in any of your taxes or child support, things like that. And as Louise mentioned, they would have to meet the federal income criteria. There was no specific grant maximum specified during the initial discussion about this, but like Louise mentioned, maybe an average of around $5,000 per business. Louise, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the county has received about 900 applications through their program, which just applications were due by the 16th of this month. And that's for a total programs of $1 million. So they're looking at an average of about $10,000 per grant. So maybe 100 to 150 businesses will be supported countywide through that program. We're estimating maybe 20 to 30, depending on the size and the amount of applications that we get. It's pretty much all I had, but I also just wanted to take a moment to recognize Luis and Maureen in particular for the work they really put in over the last few months supporting our residents most in need. We've been very fortunate to have them on the team. And Britta, thanks for your work on this PowerPoint tonight.
Thank you all. So first, before we get into questions, let me just say on behalf of the council, on behalf of the community, if everyone could sort of think back to the slide that Maureen had with all of the community partners and the city departments, it's, you know, I realize we have some, this isn't the most difficult decision we've had before us, but, you know, we have some policy decisions before us, but at the same time, it's really gratifying to see it all laid out about how the community and all our partners, our departments have come together in this crazy, bizarre time to help those in need in our community. And so, you know, I know the council agrees it's worthy of our immense gratitude, starting in-house and with all of our community partners. So thank you all. Getting to, I guess, the policy question before us on, you know, to me, the biggest leap is the micro business loans with the CDBG funds. I talked about it with Tom a month or two ago, maybe a month or two ago whenever it first came up. And my initial inclination, as Tom will recall, is that if we have funding like this, I prefer, because there are other arms of different levels of government to support the small business community, I prefer to try to go directly to our residents in need as opposed to going to small businesses. But I do think it's a fair case to make that the SBA and the CARES Act and the PPP loans are more geared toward larger employers and keeping, reducing the roles of unemployment, and not so much to micro businesses, although there's some there, but not as much. And maybe we're hitting sort of a market that's more in need. So I'll be interested to see what the council says. And I'm open to the idea. I've sort of gotten used to the idea. Again, my inclination would be to go directly to residents as opposed to businesses with CDBG funds, but we'll see. And I'll look for your hands. What council members who'd like to go first here? Neil Harris, go ahead. And then Lori Ann after.
All right, thank you, Mayor. First of all, thanks to all the presenters for doing such a thorough job, both in putting all this work together and then presenting it so that it's clear what you have in mind. So it's my understanding from what you've presented that the funding for this program is coming from the federal government's block grant program, which is great. So really, one basic question is this enough? Because it doesn't sound like it'll go all that far, although it's better than nothing. And secondly, since the money is dispersed in the form of loans. Presumably that means they get repaid. Do they get repaid to the city or to the federal government? And if they get repaid to the city, do we need to repay this funding down the road somewhere? Or do we get to recycle it for future uses?
Neil, I wasn't clear, obviously, in the slides because these will be available as grants. We do not anticipate offering any of these funds as repayable loans. The only loan program that we have with CDBG funds is our closing cost and down payment assistance program. Our housing assistance program for renters is always offered as a grant, and the microenterprise program would also be offered as a grant.
Okay, yeah, I thought I heard that particularly the micro enterprise program were loans, but if they're grants, that is much clearer. Thank you. So the real question is then, do we think this is enough, or do we need to reach into our own pockets as a city and see what else we can do here? I mean, for some of these programs, it sounds like we'll basically have enough money for maybe 20 grants. 20 doesn't sound like a lot with a city this size.
He was saying 20 to 30.
Even 30 doesn't sound like a lot, but
So
yeah.
are you talking about the microenterprise grants or the housing assistance grants?
Sorry, the housing assistance didn't seem like it would go all that far either. So I'm just trying to, I mean, this is how much money we got, but is this the right amount is what I'm really looking for.
So Neil, if I can just give you some more information related to that question. So the city's current CDBG award, we've already reappropriated about $40,000 from that current year's grant to launch this COVID-related rental assistance program. We have about, and Maureen mentioned this, about 78 households sort of in the queue. And of the households that we've already assisted, it's been an average payment of $1,500. Some has been as low as $600, some have been as high as $1,600, but it's been an average of $1,500. So, and that's just for April and May. So we have an idea of what the scale of the need is, and we have an idea of how many people we can help with this $100,000 allocation. But you have to keep in mind that HUD gives us an annual allocation every single year of about $425,000 to $450,000. HUD has allowed grantees to postpone applying for those funds so that we can get a stronger idea of what the COVID needs will be. So just remember that this is a one-time grant, but we still have our $450,000 grant that will be available to us, that the council will again have an opportunity to help us decide how to fund, how to create the programs with that money.
Thank you so much. I think the answer that you gave is basically there's enough for now, and we'll see how we're doing as we go forward, right? There's more money available. All right, thank you so much.
Succinctly, yes.
John, if I may, Neil, we did our best to try to make some assumptions about the number of businesses in the city, both in industry sectors and numbers that might qualify or might seek assistance. It's not just retail. We were looking at sectors including transportation, communication, even finance, insurance, and real estate, and automotive services. Number of businesses in the city with a qualifying number of employees, we estimated that to be around 1,200. How many of that number is likely to meet the income requirements? We're guesstimating around 300 of those, and maybe 30 to 40 of those would apply for assistance. We could be totally off on that, but that's our assumptions we're working with right now.
And all that is based on some assumptions about how long this situation is going to last, which is another big unknown at this point.
We made no assumptions there.
All right, thanks.
And may I add one more item about this, is that HUD allows grantees to reallocate money. So if we're finding that the need is greater in one area and not as great in another area, we can move money around. HUD will allow us to do that.
All right, Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff, everyone across the board, I thought this was just an amazing response that we've done, that we've just been able to serve these communities. I know during the budget process, we talked about increasing the amount of money that we were allocating for our community services division. And this is just going above and beyond, thinking outside of the box to serve those most in need. And, you know, while it's not going to be enough for everyone, I'm glad that we're already thinking ahead of other streams of income, other pots of money that we can take advantage of that won't impact our reserves. And so I did have a few questions about the presentation. I'll start with Maureen's. You mentioned that the families that are taking advantage of the hub, you said there's about 50 plus families every week. Do we know if these are the same families? Are these different individuals, or repetitive?
It's a combination. We kind of had to figure things out as we were going, and we realized when the families were referred, we had to commit to at least 2 weeks in a row. The Germantown program commits to 3 weeks, but they're a bigger program. So the total is 110. We do 50 a week, but the total served is 110. Some people have been served once, some twice, some 3 times. We try to talk to the family or the referring folks like week to week, to see how they're doing. And of course, if all is well, to make sure they know about all the regular food resources that they can then get out to get. So we're focused specifically on that time when they really should be home in quarantine because somebody or multiple people are ill.
Okay. And are we, I guess, keeping track of the families, the individuals, where they're from, where they're located in the community that are okay. All right.
Yeah, the majority, they're all coming from 208-777879. We did get some referrals from Montgomery Village, that we took care of too. Overall, as you can tell from the number, 77 is very high, or has been high as far as the illness. But it's been across those zips that we've gotten referrals for. So.
And do we know if these are the same? Are these same families that are accessing resources? Are these the same individuals? Have they been impacted by COVID? Are we also including that in our information?
Oh, so maybe I misunderstood. I thought you were asking about the hub. So the hub is specifically for folks impacted by the COVID.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
So the other resources like Gaithersburg Help and the big distributions and the Manus delivery service now and the senior program is for everyone. But our hub in particular, because of, we have a 50 family cap too, but it was set up specifically for families that couldn't get out to any of these other food programs and needed delivery and also needed healthcare items. So it's specifically focused for those that are ill in those zip codes.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then the Financial Navigator program, have we identified the partner, or we?
We have.
Okay.
And the contract was being signed today or tomorrow, and with a press release to come out soon after.
Okay. So is it a partner that we've worked with previously?
Yes. Within our housing counseling world.
Okay. All right. And will we get a report after the, what was that, 12 to 18 months about where the people who are into the program, where they started and how they've, perfect. Okay.
Well, you'll actually get one as much as you want, because what what comes with this is an incredible data monitoring system that comes with the grant that's being set up for us and be replicated at all the cities in the nation that got this grant. So it's in real time, you know, who's calling, what are they asking for, what kinds of services do they need, what zip code do they live in. They haven't been able to get it down to actual city addresses. I believe us and a Midwest city both asked for that. But I know we can get it down to the 777879, and then we'll have to go in and kind of drill it down from there. But that will be ongoing. So anytime you want any information on what numbers are being seen and what people are asking for, you know, Tawana will have, you know, her finger on top of all of that daily. So that'll be a nice feature, because I think it'll help us determine things down the road as far as where city monies potentially should be going. It'll help us give us a nice picture of that.
Okay, thank you.
Lorianne, I think one of the interesting things about the Navigator program, it is a national program with national standards that they're issuing, but they really do allow you to customize it to what's going on in your community in terms of the information you're giving out and where you're navigating people to. So I think that was really attractive to us in terms of, you know, how we can take the support of a national entity, you know, and then apply it to a very local need.
So is it it's similar to Bank On Gaithersburg, or?
The funder is, you know, very interested in financial empowerment in general and the Bank On, but Bank On Gaithersburg, you know, is access to banking products and accounts for the unbanked and the underbanked, as well as a lot of financial education. And that is under our Financial Wellness Coalition, and Tawana Lofton oversees that. But this Financial Navigator program is specific for the COVID situation. The Cities for Financial Empowerment developed this fund, $80,000 competitive process to come in, and you get this specifically to help people navigate the world of recovery, financial recovery for themselves and for their families. So but Bank On and the Bank On products will be part of what Britta was talking about. Like, we're personalizing the resource database now with things that are specific to Gaithersburg around food and how to get help for small business and how to get insurance and how to prevent eviction. And we're also including, you know, how to establish a banking relationship, how to access Bank On, how to get your credit check. We're adding that in to the portal, you know, that we have that capability.
Okay, so people will have access to direct money. They can apply for money, or is this 80,000 for the management of the? Okay.
Yeah, it's like a one-stop hotline phone call. So all the other services that we work with and coordinate, like under the Financial Wellness Coalition, they will be people that will be folks will end up there if they need that.
Okay.
But the Navigator is that first step. So instead of calling 311 and calling us and calling the mayor and calling the, you know, where people are calling all over the place because it's so hard to know.
Just the one stop.
We're going to advertise this one number. This is the number you go to figure out why you're not getting unemployment yet. Do you qualify for Louise's housing program? You know, all of those type of things are being set up like in a script form in a database particular to the city and what our folks can access, as well as federal and state things. But we're doing that part. We're in the database now.
I kind of think of it as a kind of a triage. You know, it's kind of the first point of entry, and where do we go from here, and what do you need most, and how can I connect you to that?
Very good. I'm very excited to hear more about that. Thank you.
And accessible in definitely English and Spanish, but we're also putting, securing a translation service so that any language can access. Anybody speaking any particular language will be able to access the services. We're working on that. But as of now, it's, you know, English and Spanish staff already involved.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So the public service cap that was lifted to respond and respond to our residents. Are we changing the criteria for?
We've changed it a little bit.
Okay.
In the past, Lorianne, that program was really to help prevent evictions. But as you know, there's an eviction moratorium on. So what we are doing is we're trying to help people be current in their rent. So if they were able to pay their March rent, but not April or May, we're helping them with April and May, so that when the courts open in the end of July and start taking these cases, we won't have a flood of applicants who are, are in danger of being evicted. So it's not an eviction prevention housing stabilization program in the way it was initially envisioned. It's more helping people stay current. In the past, the program, if after our assistance, you couldn't continue to pay your rent, we weren't going to help you. Now we're going to help you because we don't know what your employment situation is going to be like in 4 months. So it has changed.
Okay. And is there a cap per person, per family?
Yes. We decided that we would use the Gaithersburg median income that the census ACS gives us of $1,697 in rent. So that is our cap. The other change is that in the past, we would not pay late fees. We are now helping to pay late fees.
Okay. So is this $1,697 one time or just throughout?
So HUD allows for short-term payment for up to 3 months. Some people only need 1 month, some people need 3 months. But the HUD regulations would not allow us to pay for more than 3 months.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my last question, thank you, is for, I guess Tom would answer this question about the micro grants. I know that at the county, the money ran out pretty quickly, and a lot of the businesses, mostly small and minority-owned businesses, that weren't able to access the funds. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned that the criteria is different to access these grants, but how are we going to make sure that we identify or that the people who need the resources the most are able to navigate this system? Are we having like an information session, or before the application becomes available, have you already identified and screened potential applicants, or just wanted to?
No, we wanted obviously to get some feedback from all of you before we decided to take action and go any further than some preliminary research we did on the possible number of businesses in the city that might qualify for this. But to answer a couple of your points, the criteria for the county microgrant program would be effectively the same as ours. If a business was already awarded money through the county's public health emergency grant, they can't get money through this.
Okay.
What's nice about this program, we thought, was that we were going to dovetail at the end of the county's microgrant program, which just stopped accepting applications within the last 6 days. And we encouraged, with direct outreach to most of our business community directly, we encouraged them to apply for the county funds. Now, obviously, everyone was not going to get support. We saw this as an opportunity for a second shot for those that didn't get the grant through the micro grant program of the county. And this would only be available for Gaithersburg businesses, unlike the current one that's available to any county business anywhere in the county. So we saw this as a second shot. We have established a pretty good communication with virtually all of our commercial landlords, which is very unlike what most other places do, which, Britta does a great job with our social media. Her entire team does. But what we also do is direct outreach to our business and property owners to let them know about opportunities that have arisen believe Neil, as a property owner, has received several of those for the last 2 or 3 months. And we would encourage by direct communication landlords to reach out to their businesses that have small employers to apply for this. And obviously we would include instructions and an opportunity for anyone to ask questions in advance of the application process.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys for all you are doing.
Okay, Mike and then Rob.
So I want to echo the compliments of my colleagues. This was a very impressive and comprehensive presentation from the three of you. I think, from beginning to the end, I think our efforts to address, to provide assistance for housing and rental assistance, and I mean, it's not eviction prevention yet, but I think we have to expect that out of this pandemic and the economic downturn is that we might expect an increase in homelessness. So if we can mitigate some of that now, I think that that's certainly an appropriate action on our part. So I want to compliment you guys for what you managed to put together here. One thing I'm not going to, I think both Neil and Lorianne asked some things that I had some similar questions about, so I won't go there again. I do agree that it's a good idea to find a partner to help manage some of this stuff so that you and your teams can continue to look at other creative ways to address this, what we might do going forward, because I don't think we're not near being through this. As I commented to somebody else earlier today, I don't even think we're at the end of the beginning here. I think we're still in the middle of the beginning here. It seems clear that some parts of the country are still in wave 1 and climbing. So that's going to start, the biggest danger here, the biggest fear I think we were all concerned about is that if we came out of this too soon, there would be another shutdown later in response to the second wave. I think hopefully Maryland and Montgomery County has been going slowly enough that's not going to be that might not come to fruition. So I think that's better. But I think I was glad to see this. I was interested also in how many of our city-owned businesses located within the city participated or tried to apply, submitted applications for the county program. I think you said there were 900 applications, so I was curious how many of those were city businesses in the city. And then I guess the other question that I had is the qualifying, one of the qualifying criteria is if the business had 5 or fewer employees. And so out of the number that you think, this is based on, so you propose that the number of businesses fit that profile. And I'm just curious how many are 10 or under, and what do those people do if they're not eligible for this program? Is there something else for them? Or are we pretty firmly fixed on that 5 or fewer? And, so that's really the one question I had remaining that others didn't cover already.
The two points I'll answer, Mike. We are aware of about 900 plus applications for the most recent micro grant county program. They do not yet have a number or percentage of applications that came from city businesses. The county's public health emergency grant ultimately did award about 2,200 or so countywide, and it's estimated that about 15% of those were Gaithersburg. Now, they don't distinguish between within incorporated or unincorporated, but they characterize it as Gaithersburg. So that gives you a rough idea of how many were in the city. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head without Sharon and I looking a little deeper, a number of businesses that could have 5 to 10 employees. But Luis, you might be able to speak on the limitations of trying to go beyond the 5.
Correct. The HUD regulations specifically state that to qualify, it must be a business with 5 or fewer employees, including the owner. So 10 would not be eligible for these
So
CDBG funds.
we don't have flexibility there at all.
Not in that regard.
And we don't have a sense of the number in that next group.
I
And-
don't. I would assume it's in the hundreds, Mike, but I want to really look into it.
And what remedies or opportunities they might have for assistance as well. I guess that's really the issue. So anyway, I expect that your teams will continue to come up with new ideas. I'm excited to learn that our CARES Hub has been pretty successful rolling out. I know it's staffed by a lot of volunteers, so I want to thank all those people in the community that have either volunteered contributions or volunteered their labor to help with that too. So none of this we could do. The slogan is "It takes a village to take care of the village," and I think we certainly have great examples of that here. So it's been long-standing in Gaithersburg, but it's times like this that you really realize the generosity of people who live here. So anyway, again, thank you for your presentations.
Thanks, Mike. Rob.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Maureen, Tom, and Luis for this presentation and for all the work that you're doing and working with our community of providers. The PowerPoint presentation really shows the great extent of work and innovation that you guys are doing. It's to be commended. Yourself as well, Britta. I'm sorry. So really just some comments because all the questions that I had were answered previously. And so first comment is kind of dovetailing on what Neil said, is that I would want the programs that we're adopting, and first off, I support the programs that are being adopted, that are being proposed. But as Neil said, I don't want to see us constrained by the dollar figure of the CBDG grants. That really my concern would be how to effectively run these programs. And to the extent that that requires us thinking about additional allocations to right-size the programs, that's a conversation that I think we should be having. The other comment that I have is that comment/question, because I'm not sure if it can be answered or not, but I would want to make sure that in adopting these programs that they be done in a way that does not exclude our residents from accessing other programs, such as the county's programs. So, Tom, you had made the comment about how the county had just closed its program 6 days ago, and that this is a good way to dovetail. Now, to the extent that the county adopts other programs or has other pots of money available, I would not want to see our residents be put in the position of, well, the city has this program, why don't you go access that instead? The funds that are available to the county should be available to our city residents. So that's just a word of caution. We'll just think about how that we can work these programs in such a way that the county's programs work synergistically for the benefit of our city residents, and not that the county programs, because we're adopting these, are now exclusionary in nature. But overall, kudos on the good work here and the good work going forward.
Thanks, Rob. We'll go to Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo all the kudos to our outstanding staff teams on this for all your great work. We've often said, it bears repeating tonight, we have a long tradition in Gaithersburg of stepping up for those in need, particularly at times when people need it most, instead of just trying to do it when we can afford it, when our coffers are full. And fortunately, financially and in terms of our priorities, I think we're well positioned to maximize our ability to help due to our human capital and the expertise of our community services folks and our housing folks and our great partnerships with our nonprofits and our service infrastructure that's already been in place and been robust for many years, where we can connect clients in need from the community with the services that we know are there. I think there's a bit of a different way to approach the question from what Neil and maybe what Rob were talking about. I think there's a way to ask, I think what they were asking is, how much money do we need to do what we want to do? And I think for me, the question is, while that is in an ideal world, the question that we might want to ask when we can access more resources, to me, the more sort of practical question at this time, given the economy, given the potential limitations here, the question is, how much can we get? And with that amount, what can we do? And what's the most effective thing that we can do with the amount that we can get? Which is a slightly different question. And, you know, there's two different buckets of funding here that I don't think we ought to confuse. One, of course, is our own budgeted grants for nonprofits from the city budget, which we have increased for the forthcoming budget year. And then the other is this special extra CDBG money from HUD that we're talking about, which, as Louise pointed out, goes beyond our usual annual allocation. And I did want to ask Louise, were we talking about the federal fiscal year here? So we get our next usual allocation of $450,000 would be starting in October of calendar year 2020?
So typically those funds are available to us on July 1st.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yes.
So,
But I have not submitted an application yet for those funds.
got it. So I see this sort of extra CDBG funding as bridge funding, you know, sort of extra amount that we can use to try and get us through this current most rough patch, and then start to access our additional regular supply of CDBG funding sometime after July 1st. So it's kind of a bridge. I am concerned that we are going to see a swell of need when the federal unemployment insurance bonus runs out starting in July, that extra $600 that the federal government is giving to people who are receiving unemployment insurance now. That's going to run out unless Congress decides to extend it. And I'm not holding my breath for that. Which means that even people who've been getting a little bit of extra help from the federal government to be able to pay their rent for the last few months or buy food for the last few months will start to have greater need. So I do think we need to position ourselves to be ready for that. So I think, you know, generally, all of the proposals that have been made by staff make a lot of sense to me. I'm very excited about the financial Navigator program for those affected by COVID-related financial issues. And while it's not exactly the same thing as Bank on Gaithersburg, it falls very neatly under our Coalition for Financial Wellness Services and plugs directly into a lot of the things that we're doing with our partners. And I think it's absolutely awesome that we were able to get an outside foundation to essentially pay for that for us for free. These services, you know, these sort of client referral services and client management, you know, case management services for finances are going to be critical for people who just don't know where to turn and, you know, how to access the aid that's out there and the other resources. So that's really the key role that they're going to play. And I think it's just an awesome thing that our staff was able to get this grant and put this in place. I also think our GIS dashboard, which you talked about, is a great example of data-driven governing. We're all kind of scrambling to try and figure out what to do. Every level of government is. And we've seen dashboards from the state and county on some of the health-related COVID information. But to get to this granular level in the city, particularly with aid and service issuance, I think is really something that'll be helpful to us to be able to look at the map and kind of figure out what we need to do to improve it, what works and what doesn't, and really be able to track it later on for long-term planning about future emergencies as well. Actually, what we are doing with housing was supposed to be presented to a committee of the Maryland House of Delegates in a virtual hearing tomorrow that ultimately got postponed. But the timing was really good with the presentation tonight, because I was going to take a lot of this innovative stuff that we're doing and also the data that we're collecting about what the needs are and present it to the state, because I do think there's some interest among state legislators about how local governments are dealing with it, and what is the situation on the ground. So this information will ultimately be presented to them, and it's going to be really useful, I think. With respect to the business micro grant program, I have the same reticence as the mayor about the idea of direct business grants. I'm okay with it, and my concerns are not so much that I would object to us moving forward with it. After all, I mean, I think the express limitations put in place by HUD kind of keep things in check so the program doesn't try to overreach. Personally, I'd rather, if we had resources, prioritize those for the direct need for safety net services if we have limited funds. But the other concern that I have is that we don't necessarily have the scope of resources or scale to be able to put in place a whole new bureaucracy for managing a program like this without taking on a whole bunch of additional work. And I'm not sure that the funds are enough of an impact, or that we'd be able to get enough additional funds to make a serious impact. And we don't really have control over whether other programs are going to credit our aid, which is to Rob's point. We can't really tell the federal government or the state government, hey, this is our program, don't subtract the amount that we gave to a business when you're giving them your aid. We can advocate for that, but we can't necessarily prevent it. So I think there's a lot of potential problems with it. I don't like the idea of sort of an open-ended, let's put a bunch of money in a pot and just sort of see where it goes. I think we need to be more surgical here. And so I think this is an okay surgical first attempt, and we can see how it goes. I do agree with the concerns that have been expressed by Lorianne and others that if we go forward with this kind of program, it needs to be set up and it needs to be advertised in a way that provides outreach to everybody in the community so that there's equitable access to the aid. So those are some of my thoughts, but in general, I'm okay with all of the suggestions made by staff, and I think we ought to move forward.
Maureen?
I just wanted to add, Ryan, because community service staff and our vocational partners have been debating this back and forth, all the money should go into housing, or the pros and cons of supporting small business. And we're convinced now, that's where the folks that we're serving work. So it's critical to support in whatever way they can from the community service perspective. So the folks that we're helping with housing assistance and food and other things can get back to those jobs or keep those jobs. So it really is a nice combination, I think, holistic way of looking at it.
Fair point, Maureen. Thanks.
Mike? Mike, you're on mute.
Yep, sorry. Had to find my cursor again. So, going back to the federal programs, the CDBG money and the extra allotment or grant from CDBG, how many of these are going to do any of them have a citizenship requirement or residency requirement to be eligible for them? Or is that all down to local determination of qualifying criteria that wouldn't include that?
No, they do have residency requirements. The way that we're currently processing requests is that if a household has one or more resident who is a citizen or who has the required documentation, we will support the rent in a proportion to the number of people in the household. So if the rent's $1,000 and 2 people meet the residency requirements, we can provide up to $500. That's our current position.
So then it would be based on the size of the family with residential documentation.
Correct.
Not just a flat family rate for a family.
Correct.
Okay, that is a concern, and I think the fact that the micro grant, as was pointed out, if the micro grant supports a business that might employ someone without documentation, then I think that's another way to make sure that those in need are benefiting from this kind of aid. So anyway, thank you.
Lorianne.
Yes. Just to follow up on Mike's question, this is a HUD requirement, not a city imposed requirement.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I had a quick question about our toolbox grant program. Are we still getting, have we had any traffic for that program since the pandemic time?
More than average. In fact, not just for life science companies, for which there have been a couple of applications. In fact, Dennis just signed off on his very first check request for a toolbox grant. But I won't mention the landlord or the tenant, but we've received 2 for Old Town properties that are looking to bring in new retailers into an older commercial center. So demand is still there very much for the toolbox in its current form.
Good. Okay. All right. Thank you. That was all.
All right. Well, it seems like there's general support for the proposals on the table. Does everyone feel guided?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So I will note that I'll remind everyone we have a special program from the Book Festival on Wednesday evening, a panel discussion on how diverse books and stories can open minds and change the world. It's going to be excellent program, 7 p.m. on our YouTube channel. And other than that, until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.